Okay. Oh, it is 12. Okay, so we'll get started. Hopefully we'll have a few more people jump in as we get started. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Colleen Jennings. I'm the network coordinator for the New Hampshire Food Alliance, and you are here at our November Network Café, which is all about middle of the food supply chain here in New Hampshire. Before we dive right into that topic, I'm going to do a little introduction to who we are at the Food Alliance and talk a little bit about this Network Cafe series and a little bit about our work. You can go to the next slide, Katelyn. So the New Hampshire Food Alliance, we're a network of over 300 businesses, organizations, and communities, and we're all working together to build a food system that works for everyone in New Hampshire. And so all those organizations you see on this slide and all the dots on the map there, those logos are just a handful of the organizations that we work with and that work with each other to advance our common goals in the food system. We work together to learn from each other, to collaborate. That's the biggest thing, is to collaborate and network with each other so we can do more together. I think our kind of line of thinking in our work is if we know what each other's doing and know what our goals are individually, we can achieve more together as small organizations. We do all this work at the Food Alliance as a program of the University of New Hampshire in the College of Life Sciences and Agriculture. And as a part of the university, we share its dedication to making a difference, deepening our understanding of the world, and learning to find sustainable responses to the planet's biggest challenges. So we're always excited by the opportunity to not only work with students and faculty, but to bring resources from the university out into our network and into our community. So that's a really big part of our connection to UNH. Go to the next slide. And one way we're able to do that, we're able to bring those resources to the community and also just network with you all, is through our Network Cafe series, which is why you're here today. We do this every Friday, the first Friday of each month, September through April. And we use this as a space to just discuss a topic, a critical topic, or an issue that's facing our food system right now. And these Network Cafe series we hope, are designed for folks to come at any level of food systems work. It's a really inclusive opportunity for us to learn together, to grow together in our food systems work. So you'll see, as I shared in the chat, and I'll share it again for those who have just popped on, our agenda. And on our agenda is a community agreement. So that will provide you with a good understanding of, well, the agenda will provide you what we're going to go over today, but the community agreement will provide you with a good understanding of what we expect from you while you're here with us and what you can expect from us. So everyone's clear on that. So for our topic today, we are diving right into the middle of the food supply chain, which is going to be really interesting. And my colleague Katelyn Porter, our value chain coordinator here at the New Hampshire Food Alliance, is going to lead us on that journey. And there's a lot of really exciting things to hear and a lot of things for us to discuss. So we'll get into a little bit of discussion towards the end. But I'm going to pass it to Katelyn, and she'll take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Again, my name is Katelyn Porter. I'm the value chain coordinator here at the New Hampshire Food Alliance. And just like Colleen said, we're here today to discuss the first of 3 field trips that are part of a series that the New Hampshire Food Alliance is organizing in close partnership and support from the New Hampshire Department of Ag, Markets and Food and UNH Cooperative Extension. So just 2 short weeks ago, a group of about 30 New Hampshire Food Alliance network members joined us in a bus tour where we learned about New Hampshire's middle of the food supply chain. You might be asking, what is the middle of the supply chain? We will go over that in just a minute, but you might also be asking yourself, how come I didn't hear about this? Because our funding and your time is a precious and limited resource, we settled on asking a small team of the Food Alliance Network members that were representative of the network at large to join us. And then we wanted to take the opportunity through 3 network cafes to bring our experience to the broader network through pictures and stories of what we learned. So as I said, this is a series of 3. We will be going to Maine just next week to learn from our neighbors in Maine about some great projects that they're doing for middle of supply chain work. We'll be using our December Network Cafe to discuss that. We'll be then going to Northern Vermont at the end of January. So we'll be using our February Network Cafe to discuss that then. So we hope that you keep joining us so you get kind of a full picture of middle of supply chain projects that are happening in Northern New England over the next few months. And we're going to be dedicating all this time over the next few months on this topic because we're recognizing the need and importance for not only us, but for the network to really understand the middle of the supply chain, not only because that is part of a localized food system, which is more resilient, but more immediately, it is important due to the fact that the New Hampshire Department of Ag, Markets and Food just directly invested in its growth through the Resilient Food System Infrastructure Program, which you'll hear me refer to from here on out as RFSI. So the RFSI was a federal grant that came down the pike a couple of years ago, and the New Hampshire Department of Ag was awarded just over $2 million to invest in middle of the supply chain projects across the state. Since then, they have held 2 successful rounds of funding to distribute these funds to New Hampshire's producers. The first round, which distributed $1 million, was for larger infrastructure-based projects. And the next round, this past year, has been another $1 million distributed for smaller equipment-based needs. So when we say middle of the food supply chain, we're referring to all of the steps that are taken in the food supply chain that are between the farm or dock and the eater. So these could be things like washing or chopping, slicing and dicing of vegetables, freezing, packaging and labeling, filleting of fish, dehydrating, canning, storing, distributing. So as you see, and you're getting a picture of, there is a lot that happens to our food, typically between the farm and when it reaches our plate. So that is the middle of the supply chain, is all the players and all the steps that happen in between. The middle of the supply chain is often invisible and underappreciated. And nowadays it's typically happening far, far away. The middle of the supply chain is now often referred to as the missing middle, as the vast majority of the infrastructure and systems that existed in New England have almost all but vanished due to the industrialized food system. So these funds, these RFSI funds and efforts are all about localizing our food system, bringing middle of the supply chain back to New Hampshire in order to shorten the supply chain from producer to consumer to make our food system more resilient. So back to the field trip. In New Hampshire's field trip, we got to spend an amazing day together. We went to and visited Genuine Local in Laconia. We then ate an amazing lunch, a local lunch at Hannah Rush's restaurant in Laconia called Trillium, which I would highly recommend going to, where at lunch we heard from 2 RFSI grant recipients. We then went to Micro Mamas in Ware. And just to be clear, every one that we toured or heard from that day was an RFSI grant recipient who was either expanding an existing project or creating something new. So I'll be attempting to briefly go over what we saw and learned at Genuine Local and Micro Mamas, and then I'll be handing over the mic to the other 2 recipients that we heard from that day. So Genuine Local has been around for 9 years. It's a mid-sized specialty food production accelerator that was born out of a dream of making barbecue sauce. Founders Mary and Gavin essentially had to make themselves into experts, jumping through all the hoops, learning all the regulations to make their own product that they then felt passionate enough to form a business that would help others achieve their own food processing dreams. So the amazing thing about Genuine Local is that so much of what they do is pro bono. They help local producers with a dream of producing a product through the product development phase, the recipe development phase. They consult them on food safety and compliance. They help them with all of the steps. And it's not until the producer is actually in the kitchen producing a product where they start to charge. So I love this quote from Gavin, that someone can walk through the door with an idea and they can receive coaching all the way through to a finished product at Genuine Local. So they work with a couple different types of clients. One being, let's see, right behind Gavin in this photo is what we were observing that day was what we call contract manufacturing or co-manufacturing, where someone with a company can come to Genuine Local and they can essentially hire out not only the processing piece, but also like the bottling, labeling, all those middle of supply chain pieces to bring a product to a shippable item. So that day we were able to witness this beverage company. They not only made the beverage in-house from Genuine Local staff, but they also were bottling, labeling, and packaging. Another type of client that they work with are what they call local makers. And these are people such as food producers or farmers in New Hampshire that want to come in and have access to commercial kitchen space and make something themselves. So they rent out the kitchen and then have access to all the equipment. And they pay by the hour, whereas the co-manufacturers pay by the batch. And so here in these pictures, we're actually seeing farmer Aaron Lichtenberg from Winnie Woods Farm. Some of you may be familiar with him. He was in the middle of processing over 1,000 pounds of jalapenos into his pickled jalapenos that he does every year. And it was really fun to see that. So to give you an idea of the scale of Genuine Local, is the smallest production quantity is a 40-gallon kettle. So for instance, someone could make about probably 4 cases of jam if they were spending a full day at home processing with their own home size scale equipment. At Genuine Local, you could spend the same amount of time and make up to 40 cases in one day. So about a 10-fold increase in efficiency working at their space. So that's what it provides local makers. Let's see. And so they were a recipient of RFSI infrastructure grant that is going to allow them to expand their cold storage space. It's going to allow them to purchase new manufacturing equipment, which is going to allow them to be go into new avenues, be more efficient at what they already do. It's also going to allow them to dedicate some time into needed training for both staff and producers. And then on the side, that's not going to be funded through RFSI, but something that they're investing in simultaneously is even more beverage equipment, including the ability to carbonate beverages. So that's a little sneak peek of what's to come in Genuine Local. Next, we'll go to Micro Mama, see how we're doing on time. Just a few more minutes. A lot to pack in here. Micro Mamas is been in business for 14 years. And in the words of Stephanie, who's the CEO and founder of Micro Mamas, it started on $200 and a gut feeling. And now they work exclusively with local farmers to produce a line of fermented vegetable products, so think kraut and kimchi. And they sell their products wholesale to restaurants, grocery retailers, including Whole Foods and farm stores throughout the Northeast. One thing I really appreciated about hearing from Stephanie that day was a quote from her. saying, I wanted local farmers, the local middle, and the local consumer. And this really reflected a point in time in Micro Mama's growth where they were making the decision, should we start to ship our product nationally or not? And they really buckled down and decided to invest in marketing and selling just more of their product locally and regionally. So they've decided to be dedicated processor for New England. In this picture, we see Stephanie's sister, who's the COO, Chief of Operations for Micro Mamas. They are a family-run business, showing us a stainless steel crocks where all the fermentation magic happens. And this is a picture of a refrigerated trailer that they essentially had to create because they've had to become their own distributor. Not only getting product from the farm, but also getting it to the buyers has been a consistent hurdle for them to have to overcome. So this is how they've been innovative. They were a recipient of the RFSI equipment grant, which is going to enable them to invest in an individual quick freeze machine, or commonly referred to as IQF machine. This will expand her product line to now freeze-dried fermented foods. And also having this new piece of equipment will kind of add it to the list of equipment that she's invested in over the last several years that could now all be used by other food processors in the area, including things like labeling equipment, a giant peeler tumbler, and a vegetable shredder. So I think that's all I have for the reviewing the the tours. And now we'll hand it off to, unless there's any burning questions or anything in the chat that I need to know. So I'll be handing things off now to Sarah Cox, who's a farmer, owner operator of Tuckaway Farms and the visionary of the Tuckaway Food Commons.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. First, I want to thank New Hampshire Food Alliance and the Department of Ag, UNH Extension, and Annalena Bruce at the UNH Food Systems Lab, which is now part of COLSA, for all of their support and enthusiasm and guidance and technical help through the process of this entire our FSI project, and now that we are in implementation, continued support. Also Micro Mamas and Genuine Local, who were amazingly generous on the tour and provided just a ton of great information for everybody. So we received an RFSI infrastructure grant to build a kitchen in what is already a space located on our farm, but part of a property that is separating out to be a developing food hub that we're calling Tuckaway Food Commons, as Katelyn said. And the kitchen is a really important piece of what the commons are. Just to give you a picture of like what it's fitting into, the Food Commons includes a community house for workshops and meetings, Seco State Local, who run the local farmers markets and do educational programming and connect growers and producers to consumers, are located at the Food Commons. We have what has been a farm store at a small scale that received a Northeast USDA Business Builders grant. So we are working to expand that market into a collaborative multi-farm market. Currently, we're in that process. It also includes a grain mill for milling local grains and corn. And as well, we're in the process of bringing in a tortilla producer into the commons. So a lot of things under that umbrella, and this certified kitchen fits into all of them, from the market produce that will come into that kitchen. There's a flow to it. And we know those kitchens are a missing piece of this middle of the supply chain in all sorts of ways. Ours is not an incredibly large space, but a very appropriate space to do some light processing of produce, but also the tiers that we're anticipating using it, and this was through our study and grant application, are for value-added producers, individuals who need a space to be making their product for market. The second is aggregating Seacoast growers into Seacoast branded products. So a way for local growers with seconds, vegetables for excess in vegetables and fruits to be able to come together and create some products that have a real Seacoast vibe and brand. The third is nutrition and cooking classes, and this would be in partnership with Seacoast Eat Local and UNH Extension and other groups. And the fourth is chef events and classes. So the ability to run some ticketed events where you could do some real education with our local chefs who are very committed to local farms. So those are the intended uses, and where we are right now is when we applied, we already had to have the floor plan and the general business plan, but right now the process is beginning both that building and doing some of the technical work of the certifications and the licensing. This is where Genuine Local is a huge resource for us with all of their experience. Really refining that floor plan so that where the drains go and the electric, you know, real nitty gritty stuff. We have our contractors who helped us with the original plan. So this month, we're starting what was our matching part of the grant, which is a lot of demo and excavation and breaking up concrete. And the contractors will come in then and be able to move forward. At the same time, we're working with, and this came out through the support of New Hampshire Food Alliance and UNH Extension, with some consulting with FoodWorks Group and some other people. And they're helping us really refine what the revenue streams are and how to make this truly viable over time, which means even though we have those users known, refining those surveys and really making sure that as we bring in equipment, we're meeting the needs of all those uses, both universally and then some specific needs. So that's about where we are. And this is so appreciated to have this interest from everybody on the call and the organizers.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And yeah, we'll just have people, I think we'll have a good chunk of time at the end to answer any questions you might have for any of our speakers. But feel free to put them in the chat. We'll make sure to get to them. Next, I want to introduce Lionel Chute. He's the director of the Sullivan County Conservation District, who will talk about their RFSI project. Lionel.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, there we go.
Great. Hello, everybody. I also am very appreciative of the beautiful network that has formed with the New Hampshire Food Alliance, the Department of Agriculture and Cooperative Extension, and the beautiful help that we're having from Genuine Local and Micro Mamas to think about sort of what it's going to take to do this effort collaboratively and in a way that really adds value to the whole state's food supply. I'm very excited about the whole initiative and see it as extremely timely and very important. So I'm just delighted to be part of this. We've been working, the Conservation District has been working for a number of years to try to build community around our local food supply, our county-wide and then regional to some extent, because we're very close to the Connecticut River and to Vermont producers as well. And in many ways, our region is a food desert in terms of not having really a lot of local product. But what we've learned over the years is that we have a lot of local producers. They just haven't been connected or helped in ways so that their foods could be more widely available or available throughout the year instead of just seasonally. And so we've been trying to help with that. And we have a local food network called the Claremont Growers Collective, which the Conservation District is the fiscal sponsor of. And there's a lot of good energy there. We're up to about 75 members now. And the criteria for membership is all hyper-local. It's about folks either growing or raising local foods or selling products that were derived from foods and that were grown or raised in the service area. And by doing that, we're hoping to positively affect the local economy so that we're connecting the dots. We want to serve as a matchmaker between the growers and the sellers. And so we have markets as well as producers in our network. And it's just a matter of understanding what their needs are better and then serving to create bridges so that more local product will be available throughout our region. And so the RFSI opportunity was really timely for us. We reached out to our network, to the producer network, and we asked them, you know, what do you guys need in order to go to the next step? And what we learned was that there's a lot of need for equipment and a real aversion to taking that on individually. So individual farmers are busy enough as it is. They don't have the time, the energy, the capacity to go through the steps of purchasing equipment. And so the RFSI vision of creating shared use spaces was not only perfect, but also entirely appropriate to the conservation district to try to help with and tackle. So long story short, we have a very strong relationship with our county, and the county has generously agreed to lease us space right here in Unity, New Hampshire at the Sullivan County Complex. And so we're just starting the process now of renovating a floor of a building. This will be a 1,300 square foot facility. And we've got a floor plan that has emerged, so we have a good sense of how it's going to flow. And we definitely know that we're going to need to provide training, not only to users of the equipment, but ideally also to young people, because one of the things our district is known for is education of young people. And so we're hoping to create a space that can be fully professional for folks that are making commercial products, but also relatively easily switched over to something that would facilitate a fourth grade class to come in and learn about the equipment and maybe even try their hand at freeze drying some candy or some produce, and hopefully get excited about that. So training will be a big piece of this. We're also excited. We're going to be focusing on freezing. So there'll be vegetables and fruits that will benefit from being flash frozen to retain their nutrients and minimize ice crystals. And then we'll have a reach-in freezer that the frozen product can go into for temporary storage. We're also going to have a vacuum sealer, a chamber vacuum sealer that will allow us to package the frozen product right away. We're also going to have two other capabilities that we'll be using the packager for, in addition to freezing. we're getting a freeze dryer. And we're very excited to explore that, as are some of the chefs of the area, because freeze-dried food has different texture, and it's very exciting if you're trying to create new recipes. So the packager can also serve to vacuum seal the freeze-dried product. And then the third area will be dehydration. So for certain things like apple rings, for example, dehydrating is going to be a better or more desirable than freezing or possibly freeze drying. And so folks that want to dehydrate, mushrooms is another example, herbs will be able to move from the dehydrator right to the vacuum sealer as well. And so we're hoping to create three pathways by which a lot of packages of preserved foods will amass and then go out to market. And by leveraging the Claremont Growers Collective market side, we're optimistic that we can find homes for all this new food and these new products. The last thing I just want to mention briefly is that we're also working hard in nuts, specifically a bitternut hickory, also called yellow bud hickory, which is Caria cordiformis. This is a native hickory tree that's been completely overlooked for many years. And the name bitternut means what it says. You can't really eat it as a regular nut. But what the Native Americans knew is that if you crush the nut, it's loaded with oil, and the oil is not bitter at all. And so the oil is highly nutritious and on par with olive oil. It makes a beautiful culinary oil. And working in partnership with folks in Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York State, the Conservation District has been working to develop this as a new food for the region. And we happen to have a lot of this hickory tree all along the Connecticut River. And so we've been collecting these nuts, and they've been getting crushed and pressed elsewhere. But thanks to this grant, we're going to be buying our own nut press and producing our own oil. And we've got a number of farmers that are very excited about this. They already have trees in their back 40. They're planting trees. And so the idea of creating this whole new food of this oil, this culinary oil, we're hopeful will be similar to the experience of bringing maple syrup online 100 years ago. It could be that familiar and enculturated ultimately, especially in light of climate change, where it may turn out that sugar maple trees will decline. Oak and hickory is expected to increase. And so ideally we'll have both, but we should be seeing more and more hickory trees coming into the area by virtue of global warming. Anyway, I could go on, but we're very excited. And there's a lot to work on right now with the regulatory side and the building conversion, the permitting, HACCP plans, food safety plans. So we're up to our elbows in it, but we're having a great time. So if you have any questions or want to reach out, please do. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lionel, so much, and Sarah. Two very exciting projects in the Seacoast and along the Connecticut River Valley. Just really innovative and inspiring projects that's hopefully just going to really bring a lot of opportunity to producers in those areas. So appreciate hearing about both of those. We know we've been throwing a lot of information your way. I know I took so much away from this tour, and I'm sure you all are kind of absorbing the information now. I wanted to take a minute to introduce and bring our Assistant Commissioner of Ag, Josh Marshall, has joined us, and would love to see if he'd like to share any reflections or takeaways that he had from the day.
Yes, thank you. And I'm glad I was able to switch to my phone. For some reason, the audio stopped on my computer and I couldn't figure it out, but I'm here. So I missed a little bit. But speaking specifically to the field trip, I think the idea here was to get people together, to get people out and seeing what's happening. I know that whenever I visit a farm or a food business, you walk away with a lot of energy, a lot of inspiration, and a lot of new connections. And so that's what we saw, was not only at the spots, but on the bus and afterwards, seeing people exchanging cards and, hey, let's talk about this, let's revisit this. That was sort of the idea, and I think it came to fruition. In general, with this sort of middle of the supply chain investment, I don't think we've seen a lot of that in the past, especially from USDA. Everything's sort of been, the farming part. Does a farm need a no-till planter? Does a farm need a new piece of equipment? And while those investments are still needed and obviously valuable, I think this investment in the middle of the supply chain is going to lead to more opportunities for farms. If there's new markets for them to sell their products, then they have the opportunity to grow more and sell more and get more of that dollar here in New Hampshire. So I think that it's going to have a lot of ripple effects, not just in the businesses that are getting equipment or are getting infrastructure, but in their ability to purchase from other local farms. And we were really specific and intentional with that in how we selected awardees and what we encouraged the review committees to look at for criteria of, was this going to impact more than just one business? So I think that's a sort of a good reflection on both the tour and the whole project so far.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Super insightful. And yeah, couldn't agree more. A couple of reflections I had were very similar and overlapping, but a couple of different ones were that geographically speaking, the majority of New Hampshire's growers don't currently have access to processing equipment at scale. And I think we, as a New Hampshire Food Alliance team, as we were kind of digesting the day together, we came to the conclusion that it felt eye-opening to start unraveling the realization that we might not have the best sense of the current and continued need for processing capacity in New Hampshire. So really kind of amplified in our minds that need to continually be listening to producers, gaining an understanding of what middle of the supply chain infrastructure exists and how do we make that used as effectively as possible, but also what are the needs and where are the gaps so that we can continue to organize the network across the state in supporting producers to make sure that those projects come to fruition. Another one was, by and large, producers are not necessarily the ones doing the processing. And this is not to look over or overshadow the fact that there are a lot of New Hampshire producers who are taking advantage of, homestead laws and are doing a lot of processing in their kitchens and bringing things to farmers markets or selling things at their own farm store stands, jams, jellies, homemade products like that. But when we're speaking about scale, thinking about things like Micro Mamas or some of the hot sauces being created or beverages created at Genuine Local, things that have the ability to really scale up or ship across the region or even the country. In those instances, most of the time, it is producers who are partnering with processors, selling their product to someone like Micro Mamas, or working with a co-manufacturer like Genuine Local. So I thought that was an interesting note and observation, and important to really continue to listen to what's needed, because producers, farmers may not have the capacity to process things on their own, but like Josh was saying, it could be the need for them to access markets. farmers don't necessarily need to be taking on more work, but we need to be providing the middle of supply chain support so that their product can find its way to market. Another one is a theme throughout the day, at least in my mind, was that processors currently lack access to statewide and regional distribution. It was eye-opening to see Micro Mama's trailer that they essentially had to create to become their own distributor. And a lot of the time we were hearing stories from folks working with Genuine Local that it can often be a lower lift to work with a distributor in other parts of the country, to make a pallet full of product and then to ship it to another state to then, enter into a warehouse and a whole distribution network of a company outside of New England, then it can be sometimes to get product across the Northeast. So I'm just flagging that from my perspective, it's kind of a continued need for our processors and producers to be able to access distribution systems. And lastly, I'll just reiterate Josh's point that I want to reflect that the RFSI investment in the middle supply chain is inevitably game-changing for New Hampshire. It's so exciting to see all the diverse ways that these investments are going to play out in the state, whether it's an expansion of existing spaces or wholly new projects and ideas that are being invested in. The fact that the awards that were given to projects prioritize the ability for these producers to share their equipment, I think is huge, and it's going to have inevitably a ripple effect across our state. So I'm really excited to see some things that come from these projects. So given it's just about time to transition into questions from the audience. So if you have questions, start putting them in the chat. And I wonder if a good segue into Q&A might be to ask Josh a question that I have personally, and I hope you all find valuable, is I've been curious, you are in an interesting perspective in that you were able to see the applications come in through both the infrastructure and the equipment grant processes. And I'm wondering if there were any themes that emerged for the types of infrastructure or equipment that people were seeking to fund, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if some of this was because of the program build required us, which we would have done anyway, but I really appreciated the fact that USDA built this into the program, was to do outreach and, find what New Hampshire food producers thought were the priorities. So we came up with a priority list that was based on the feedback that we heard from listening sessions and from surveys. But those ended up being refrigerated delivery vehicles, cold storage, and commercial kitchen type applications. And so that was probably the majority of them. And not only were delivery vehicles the vast majority of what we received for applications in terms of the equipment only side here in New Hampshire, it's also what they've seen nationally. I was just on a call yesterday with the USDA RFSI team, which is for some reason still able to work. And they were saying that that's predominantly what was being purchased across the country, was refrigerated delivery vehicles. So it goes to show you that that's one of those gaps. And but something I've also thought was interesting as I've been looking through doing contracts with all of the projects to try to get them through the executive council process to get that final approval, is just the variety that was awarded in terms of what they're producing, but also the food products that are involved. We've got 2 aquaculture projects that, one's a delivery vehicle, but one was an ice maker that is something you would not necessarily think of immediately in terms of the food supply, but having to buy bags of ice at the grocery store and put it in coolers versus having actual cold storage and ice manufacturing ability yourself. That's a big difference. We had 2 wineries, and that's going to be able to add to the fruit growers in the state who will be able to purchase apples from them, and 2 projects that involve culinary grains, something I think that we're going to see more of in New Hampshire, both processing and production, as I've seen dairy farms switch over some of their croplands to grains to diversify. So those are a couple of the things that we saw in the applications and that we're seeing sort of throughout the state.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. And I'll hand things over to Colleen to manage the Q&A.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Sarah and Lionel and Josh and Katelyn. I was on the trip and I learned more. So this is great to really hear it all laid out like this. And I appreciate you all so much. We have some good questions coming through the chat here. Carol, you're so sweet. I do think that every one of these projects should be on New Hampshire Chronicle. So let's put that out into the world. 100% agree. John, this probably is a question for Josh. I think, what's the status of meat processing in New Hampshire? And he's asking about the effort that was made to build some of that local infrastructure that was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, great question. So we, the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture, invested $750,000 of ARPA funding into the local meat and poultry processing industry. That project, really, the funding went out at the beginning of 2024 or the end of 2023. I can't remember anymore, but all that funding has gone out and the projects are complete. I think it added a lot of capacity to those. It was like 8 different projects, including the USDA certified processors, but also small processors of poultry and some custom exempt facilities. But what's really exciting, not that that's not exciting, but what's also exciting is the UNH certificate program for meat processing and food safety that's going on right now. And we also were able to invest the money to fund that, the development of that program, to provide a certificate for folks who, to build workforce, to have folks who are able to enter that industry with the experience and some practical hands-on knowledge of meat processing. And the first 100 students through that project, that program will be tuition free due to that funding. So that's up and running. I believe the first hands-on session happened in October. And so that's sort of the overview of what that investment was directly from the department.
Thanks, Josh. And just to clarify, and tell me if I'm wrong or right, meat processing was not eligible for the RFSI. Is that correct? Right. So yeah, I just want to clarify that too.
And there will be another, as I understand, USDA will be putting out another round of meat processing grants. That's why meat processing wasn't allowed in this, because USDA has another program that covers that. And so we'll share that information with the Food Alliance and everybody when that happens, and we'll share that opportunity far and wide.
Great, thanks, Josh. And Kate Bowen, I see your question, Jess, and I want to get to it, but I want to keep on the meat thing for a second. Kate Bowen has put in the chat about Montshire, formerly PT Farms in Haverhill, and Granite State and Claremont are expanding their meat processing capacity. Kate, do you want to share a little bit about that, or is that just an update? You're welcome to come off mute. Sure, yeah. Are you having trouble unmuting? I hope we had this issue before. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can get you unmuted. Hold on. That's very strange. Sometimes the middle of the supply chain seems easy compared to Teams. Okay, let's see. Where is Kate? There she is. Okay. Okay, Kate, you should be good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, so New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, we're in Claremont, and so we are working with USDA as sort of their pass-through entity to manage local MCAP grant and also the Meat and Poultry Expansion Program, MPEP, which is more of a construction-focused large meat and poultry processing grant program. And it does look like there was a press release from USDA in the White House saying possibly MPEP was going to maybe have another round of funding, but there weren't any other details provided about that and what that would look like. But hopefully we'll hear some of that if the government reopens. So right now with the local MCAP program, that is largely, it's an expansion program for meat and poultry processors, and just from however the cookie crumbled, whatever people did sort of win and were awarded. In New Hampshire, there weren't any poultry processors. It just happened to fall into the meat. So that's really in New Hampshire, that's mostly beef and pork. So I actually used to be a customer at PT Farms, and they were sold to Mark Boyden, who has sort of a long-standing in northern Vermont reputation as an awesome beef farmer and kind of an early regenerative beef farmer person. And so anyways, they're sort of modernizing, updating the old PT Farm space, which is right in Haverhill, not far from the best store in the world, Farmway, for clothing, if you ever need anything over on the other side of the river. And so they're working on expanding capacity. So that was really the most important thing about this was, and the focus of USDA was, how do we serve more producers? And the size of projects for Granite State, that is also one that there was a little bit of a change with Vermont Packing House with ownership changes. And so one of the founders of that Vermont Packing House, who was a really good sausage maker, he and another partner have started Granite State Processing, which is in Claremont. We toured it as a team. The Sustainable Foods Program team toured it a couple months ago. And it is the old, it's an old facility in Claremont, and they're just getting new equipment, which will just increase capacity. And one of the most important things that, farmers in Vermont and New Hampshire need is open slaughterhouse dates. And that's been really challenging to get, especially as some of the existing processing facilities have put minimums on how you can get an appointment. So you might need to bring in 10 hogs at a time, or you might need to, do 20 cows a year, but a lot of small family farms might just have 5 cows a year. And so that has created a huge stress on meat and poultry processors in New Hampshire. So anyways, these two projects alone, I believe it's over $3.7 million of federal funding that are going to them. And it just helps from everything from, roll stock packaging machines to grinders to stuffers, all different things like that. It can also help with personnel training, that sort of expense. So anyways, we're just working directly with them. It's really exciting. And I hope that if this new funding comes out from USDA soon, I hope that we can really support smaller facilities with accessing, just people to read grants and just read their applications and kind of nurture their ideas. Because I think some people feel like this is out of their wheelhouse to be able to reach these programs and funding, and they feel like maybe they need to hire a really expensive grant writer, or they just need to have their business planning revamped. And I feel like that's a really awesome way that we can all provide, shared technical assistance resources to get this, because we definitely need more of this, especially for poultry processors in New Hampshire. That's a dire need for USDA level processing. Most New Hampshire farmers are traveling far, far, far out of the region to get their birds processed. So anyways, yeah, happy to chat about it, and really excited. And I wish I had one of these facilities near us for the food processing. It's awesome to see you guys have that in New Hampshire. So thank you guys.
Thanks so much, Kate. You're so knowledgeable about this. We should have had you as a presenter. And yeah, I think it's a hot topic right now in the meat processing, and great to hear, Josh, that there's going to be some more investment in that area as well from the USDA. So on the same topic of funding opportunities, Jess is asking about any insights or advice for funding opportunities in this area for 2026 or beyond.
In terms of RFSI, the funding is been allotted. I don't work for the federal government, but I do not anticipate another round. But what I hope is that the data that comes from the reporting of this program, which runs through 2027, will demonstrate both the value and the need, and that it'll make it a really hard choice for any government to not support this type of investment moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Let's see, we got 2 questions. Martha has a question. This is for all presenters. What is your approach for marketing and customer relationship building? I feel like that is good for Sarah and Lionel to answer for sure. But if Josh and Katelyn has something, jump in. Either
Sarah,
one.
do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, so we have kind of a multi-pronged approach to this. We're lucky because where our farm is, we're an established farm, so we have a lot of word of mouth through that network to start with. That's one thing. But the Tuckaway Food Commons as a whole and how this kitchen will be part of it is a whole nother world of that kind of outreach and getting people to know that it's there. So we have for one thing, we have the resources that are right here with us. We have the Food Alliance and Extension and Secretly Local and the groups that can disseminate that already have relationships with the kind of people who might want to use this kitchen, help us when we're doing surveys, help people just connect into it. So that's fantastic. We're also building out, I have a small grant to work with a website person who will be building a Tuckaway Food Commons website. I'm working with her right now, and that will have a whole page for all these different categories, so that for people who are looking to rent the space to use for workshops, there'd be an application process, and for people who are interested in the kitchen, there would be a way to really be in touch and start that process. So, really multifaceted. We have a lot of resources to help us spread that word. But I think that's where we are right now. Because we have a lot of overlapping things at the Food Commons, each one is meant to sort of stack and help the other one gain traction. And I think that will serve it really well. But any suggestions? Appreciated. Let's use your knowledge, please.
And I'll just share that we started from our Claremont Growers Collective network, and so we already knew that we had users. I mean, they basically asked for this equipment. Another piece of equipment I didn't mention is a $20,000 labeler that will allow anyone to label clamshells or boxes or bags, So we know that we've got some users lined up already. I mean, they're just waiting for the equipment, some of our farms of the area. And then through our network, we're quite sure that there'll be a lot more interest in the equipment once it's set up and running. As I mentioned, we're also hoping to branch out into training and education, which will continue to add value. We do a school to farm event here at the Sullivan County Complex that brings in 200 to 300 kids from the area. And we're always so happy to see how the kids go home and talk to their parents, and then the whole community is aware of a lot of the things that we're doing or new initiatives that are coming about. I guess I'm operating to some extent under the premise of if we build it, they will come. And I really think that's true based on the excitement that we've been hearing and the feedback. But we also have a large mailing list, the Conservation District has been in business now for close to 80 years. And so we're very well known, and we have a lot of good relationships. So it's just a matter of getting it up and running, I hope.
Awesome. Thanks, Lionel. We're about at time. I have a question for Lionel that I would love to ask, and then if folks can stay on, they can. I'm going to put some of our last minute wrap up in the chat while I do that. But Lionel, I feel like the structure of how you all are doing it as the conservation district and offering this service to your area and to your producers in your area is so unique. And I wonder if you have any advice for folks on the call if they're a part of their own conservation district in their area, like how to advocate for that, or if you have some advice on what it takes as a not a business necessarily to do something like the project that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, from the district side of things, as you may or may not know, conservation districts started as a result of the Dust Bowl, and so in Vermont, they're all referred to as soil and water conservation districts. So the idea of sort of branching out and really directly focusing on food production, and not even in the soil, but after it's been harvested, is a little unusual. I took my inspiration from Amanda Littleton, who headed up the Cheshire County Conservation District for many years. She had a vision to focus on the local food network and did a lot of great work that Benet Hershon is now continuing. So I do think there's a role for districts. I think we're really well positioned to do that, but it's also a little untraditional in that we're not talking about soil health, we're not talking about water quality or preventing erosion. We're more focused on the food itself. The other thing that we have going for us, as I said earlier, is our great relationship with our county. And so, unlike many of my colleagues, I'm also the director of natural resources for Sullivan County, which means that I manage the land base of 2,200 acres, and so we're very well known to the county government and appreciated, and we have land. We don't typically have real estate. This will be a first for us to rent a building, but it's I guess all I'm trying to say is relationships are very important. And so whether it's a district or a nonprofit organization, if you've been around for a while and you want to get into this, really start reaching out to all of your partners and see if they're excited about it as well. And then it shouldn't be as heavy a lift.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lionel, for hanging on with my question there. And thank you to all of you for being here. Again, thank you to all of our speakers, for Josh for taking the time out, and Sarah and Lionel and Katelyn. In the chat there's an evaluation that we'd love for you to take. It helps us make these times together better and more constructive. And also the registration link for our next Network Cafe, which will be part 2 of this. You'll hear about all of our learnings from Maine. So please join us for that and have a great weekend.